Quick question. Does anyone remember when stores used to rent out game consoles? When I was a kid, I didn't exactly have the money to buy a $300 toy, so I'd gladly spend $20 to $25 for a 2-day period to try out the Sega Saturn, PlayStation, and Nintendo 64. Yeah, it was pretty financially stupid, but I also bought a Neo Geo Pocket Color when it first launched, so I wasn't the savviest early adopter. You'll pry that weird Army Camo Pocket Color from my dead hands though. That Metal Slug port kicked ass. Now, had I chosen games other than Clockwork Knight or Bug, maybe I would have grown to love the Sega Saturn and checked out stuff like Panzer Dragoon Saga or Burning Rangers. Okay, actually, Clockwork Knight was kinda cool, but not necessarily a system seller. Renting the N64 gave me the opportunity to play Mario 64 and Pilot Wings, and that was super cool. And the game I chose to try out with the PlayStation was none other than today's game, Jumping Flash by Studio Exact, a somewhat primitive first-person 3D platformer that has more in common with arcade games than its peers in the nascent genre. And that kinda makes sense because console publishers were still transitioning out of the arcade and into the home. That first year of the PS1 had games like Toshinden, Ridge Racer, The Raiden Project, and Cybersled. So it certainly gives context to Jumping Flash being designed the way it is. It's not a collectathon, it's not a massive collection of open-world stages, it's just a simple platformer about grabbing all the carrot jet pods and then reaching the exit while blasting any enemy that gets in your way. The evil Baron Aloha is, doing something to these various space islands. I'll be honest, I don't really know what the plot is, and I even turned the optional cutscenes on, which default to off normally, so I guess the developer doesn't care either. All you need to know is there's a bad guy and you're a robot rabbit sent to stop him, traveling to 6 different chain worlds of 3 themed islands, collecting carrots, using power-ups to destroy enemies, and getting to the exit before time runs out. What most people will remember about this game is the way you jump. For being one of the first 3D platformers, you might be surprised to learn that Robert can not only double jump, but triple jump. And as you leap super high, the camera will swing down to your feet to help you land on platforms. This was a very new style of platformer at the time, and first person, so it kinda makes sense that they'd want it to be easy to get used to. And certainly this downward camera will help to angle your landings, though it's far from perfect. In fact, I'd say the movement and camera work will take a few stages to get used to. For starters, there's no strafing whatsoever, it's pure tank controls. Secondly, the only way to look up or down is to hold R2, something you can only really do while you're stationary. This is a launch year title, so there's no analog support, putting all movement and camera work on the directional pad. Combined with the first-person perspective, this means you kinda have to find platforms by jumping, causing leaps of faith that the developers were obviously trying to avoid. This is compensated for by giving you a very long time limit, usually 10 minutes per stage, which you won't even need half of, so you can stop to take a breather if you need to take a look around and find the next jet pod. Unfortunately, the game's poor draw distance makes that a bit more difficult than necessary. While the early stages are small and compact, the later stages get larger and taller, which can lead to some confusing navigation as entire structures will seemingly appear out of nowhere. And the radar doesn't exactly stretch much further either, so you will get to a point in several stages where you'll have to go back and forth trying to see what mysterious invisible building has the final carrot. Thankfully, there are a few ways the game breaks up the action. There are bonus rings you can find which take you to a tiny little bonus stage where destroying all the balloons will get you an extra life. There are also stages that take place indoors, and these almost resemble more of a Wolfenstein 3D kind of shooter, which aren't the most sophisticated layouts, but they're still fun. And then every world has a boss stage, and the bosses are okay. Some of them exist for the sake of giving the game bosses, like this pretty basic dragon, but a couple are actually kind of inventive. Check out this Gunstar Heroes-esque boss that changes forms to a spike ball or a giant robot. Or this wizard hiding various giant limbs inside of teacups? What the hell? Each little diversion helps keep the game from becoming monotonous. Of course, this game can be beaten within 2 hours, so monotony wasn't likely, but I still appreciate the variety. Now, memories are funny, and I really remember this game running at a smooth 60 frames per second, but that was clearly inaccurate. It actually has some pretty chunky moments despite a very simple art style and poor draw distance. But thanks to the magic of emulators, you can actually overclock the PS1's CPU to get that frame rate more stable. Still, I wouldn't say the frame drops ruin the experience, but overclocking definitely helps for more accurate aiming and reaction time. Enemies aren't really going to damage you all that much, but it could make the difference against some of the bosses. Look at this George Washington-ass motherfucker shooting orbs from his pecs. You'll want some extra frames to deal with that. A year later, Studio Exact would bring out a sequel that would address some of those complaints. Jumping Flash 2 increases the draw distance, which is already a massive improvement. It's still not the greatest, and you still have the objectives appearing and disappearing in front of your eyes, but you at least have a better sense of where to go. Now, initially, I encountered a weird emulation bug where polygons were just randomly disappearing, but changing this option in the RetroArch settings fixed it in case anyone else encounters that problem. Rather than collecting jet pods, you're saving Moo-Moos, the henchmen of Baron Aloha, who have gotten themselves trapped by the even more evil Captain Kabuki. Compared to the first game, there are a lot more story cutscenes with hammy acting, just the way I like it.
Oh my, what a revolting development this has turned out to be.
The platforming has also gotten a lot trickier, with smaller and smaller platforms spaced further and further apart in the air, which is much appreciated after the original game was fairly basic in its level design. They've also gone and changed up a lot of the theming, with worlds like ancient ruins, tropical islands, and Japanese architecture. I really like this circus level with working cannons, trapeze swings, and a fake moon and clouds like a stage production. They even switched out the rainbow roads.
It's a road that you go when you die.
For roller coaster tracks, and they're kind of fun to just ride around on. Other than that, this is essentially the same game on the same engine, which means an inconsistent frame rate, a lot of the same enemies and power-ups, and the same 6-world 18-stage structure. The bosses are not quite as memorable this time around, and a couple are flat out annoying, though I did like these Muppety clowns, one of which shouts giant words at you. You basically have to look at this as an expansion pack more than a sequel, and it's pretty good as far as those go. Both games feature an extra mode on completion that rearranges the location of jet pods, Moo-Moos, and bonus rings. But Jumping Flash 2 takes it an extra step by changing up the time of day of levels, the UI helper, and it even has all new story cutscenes. This makes it feel a lot more like a worthwhile post-game pursuit and a work of passion, compared to the first game's extra mode feeling like an afterthought. You can also unlock a more difficult mode called Super by collecting enough performance medals, shown in the bottom left corner of the stage menu. This is functionally the game's achievement system, which is kinda wild to have in a game from 1996, and you'll get medals for doing things like pacifist runs, collecting a ton of money, or saving the Moo-Moos in a specific order. Would I recommend playing the Jumping Flash games today? They may seem simple and crude on the surface, and in all fairness, they kinda are, but if you were a child of the 80s or 90s and jammed quarters into just about any 3D game you could find at the arcade, I think you might really like them. Yeah, they're rough around the edges, but they're far better than a lot of the other launch year games for the PS1. I mean, they both came out before Bubsy 3D, and are significantly more fun to play than that poisonous nightmare. You just have to adjust those rose-tinted glasses before playing, because they aren't quite as polished as you remember. But I still think you'll have a good time, as long as you like 3D platformers, eccentric design, and campy acting.
Time to wrap you up like a big bunny burrito! Hippity-hoppity, hippity-hop-boom!
Hey, thanks for watching this video. I've posted a couple dozen reviews over the last several months, including UFO 50, Marvelous, Demon's Crest, and Gimmick 2. If you'd like to have a say in what I cover next, I've got a poll for Patreon backers going up today, and even free members can vote. And if you chip in a few bucks, you can get your name in the credits like these fabulous people. Otherwise, you can like and subscribe and share this on social media, and I'll keep making more retro and indie reviews for you to enjoy. Next week, I'll be talking about indie releases coming out in December, but until then, you'll find me in another castle.